On January 10th, all schools in Uganda will reopen after almost 2 years of closure due to the pandemic. Ugandan children have missed school for the longest time than any other country in the world because of a strict lockdown. Whereas majority of the students will be able to resume studies normally, there are some who have no schools to return to. Some business people who owned schools before the pandemic have converted them into other businesses. There are teachers who have moved on and students who are now young mothers with babies. To discuss this reopening of schools and much more, we host the State Minister for Primary Education, Dr. Moriku Joyce Kaducu, and the UNATU Secretary General, Mr. Filbert Baguma. I'm your host, Patrick Amara. Honorable Joyce Kaducu and Mr. Filbert Baguma, Happy New Year and a most warm welcome to both of you.
Happy New Year too.
Happy New Year too.
Let me begin with you, Dr. Kaducu. On the 10th of January, which is just Monday, we hope all schools will open their gates again to receive our children who have been away from school for almost 2 years, the longest period, I think, in the entire world that our children have missed being in school. How ready are the schools, how ready are the children and even their parents, whom I'm sure have also been struggling?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, we need to thank God for this opportunity. We need to thank God that have seen us through walking this journey. We've come from afar. Today we are here, and we are now going, the roadmap is very clear, where we are moving as the education sector, and of course that is by the grace of God that we managed to reach here. We are very ready to reopen the school come 10th, which is just a few days from now. And I think this time round, it is a unique reopening of the school. It is unique because we see some values that have been added compared to the previous reopening of the school.
What values are you talking about?
I'm talking about the tools that this time we see that have been in place, which was not there before. One, we are seeing people being vaccinated. We are seeing our teachers, our elders, and those above 18 are being vaccinated, which is a strength for us for the reopening of the schools, which was not there previously. Number two, we are having a surveillance system put in place, which is basically to ensure early detection and appropriate response in terms of COVID cases. We are seeing that this system is going to help us to prevent outbreak of diseases, such that we are building a network between the schools, health facility, and then of course this was not there before. This time this is another tool that is going to help us to reopen in a safe, sustainable
profession,
manner.
You're also a medical doctor.
True.
And you talk about a surveillance team. Dr. Kaducu, you are aware that right now we are in the midst of a pandemic, a resurgence of the virus that has had Kampala in its grip. The numbers are huge. You don't need to do a surveillance. It is here. We are only lucky maybe there's less hospitalization. But I want to believe perhaps we have more COVID numbers than we ever had.
And that is very true. That's another difference we're seeing that is unique with the reopening of the school. The time when we reopened the university, tertiary, and the nurse training, the health training institutions, the positivity rate was between 7 and 5. But this time round, you see that we are reopening the schools when the positivity rate, the infection is really coming up and up. And that is why the issue of surveillance, the issue of bringing everybody on board to monitor and linking to health facility come on board. Otherwise, if we just say that, let's do it as usual, this is not the usual norm.
Yeah, but even though the Omicron variant, I suppose, maybe that's the one that is in Kampala, even though it appears to be mild, if the numbers continue to rise, there's a possibility in the big number to overwhelm the health system And that will be something very dangerous.
And that's why we are putting the preventive measures. That's why we are saying that, yes, we know that this variant affects the young children. We know it does not spare the students. It affects everybody. And that's why we are putting in place first preventive measures. If we do not tighten it up, we do not have a strong monitoring system, a system that can quickly identify, yes, there is a problem here, how do we fix this problem? A system that can tell you, there is an outbreak here, how do we fix it? Where do we take it for testing? How do we treat these people? If we do not do that, then we can say that, yes, there is a problem, but thank God, we are right in the process of doing that. And we are very confident, very optimistic that this is going to help keep our schools open.
Let me come to you, Mr. Filbert Baguma from the Ugandan National Teachers Union. You are the Secretary General of UNATU. The Minister of State for Primary Education is saying everything seems to be ready and like a well-oiled machine, they're ready to move on. Is that what you feel?
Not really. First of all, the reopening is something we have been waiting for. And every time the president was addressing the nation, people would be keenly listening to hear about the reopening of schools. Because all other neighboring countries reopened the schools and ours remained closed. Right now as we talk, there are some local governments which have not released money to schools. There are some local governments where they have sent out people to go and assess the level of repair in the schools. But remember, tomorrow is a Friday and the reopening is on Monday. And therefore, much as we are looking at reopening, yes, but it is not, the readiness is not at the level we would have expected it. Because if a head teacher is there waiting for funds to be on the bank account and then withdraw and start preparing, when you have only one day, it defeats the understanding.
What would you have suggested?
First of all, I want to imagine that there is a problem. Because some local governments released the money.
Which money are you talking about? The competition grant?
Competition
Yes,
grant.
Okay.
because it is the money that is going to help the head teachers in clearing the bushes, in repairing the desks.
So has this competition grant not been going to the schools?
It has
In the last
not-
2 years, Honorable Minister?
Of course, the money we're just talking about, the money in question, has been in the account of the government, local government. But then the issue was, we had to issue permission for them to utilize those money. And this was issued last year in December. However, some of the local
December
government,
is just last week,
yes,
yeah?
some of the local government were able immediately to pick and plan and utilize, but others up to date, that's what he's talking about, they have not released the money to the schools so that schools are in position. But as far as I know, quite a number of schools have really gotten the resources and they have started the preparation, putting whatever it needed to be put in order. In the event that there are those chief administrative officers that have not channeled the money, I think we still have the duty to pressurize these people to do the needful.
But pressurize them, I mean, you have a background of local government, Honorable Minister, right?
True.
So why is it hard for some people, if the order has been issued, why is it hard for them to release the money? Because you know you are short of time.
To the best of my knowledge, that all the local government have really released the money. But my colleague is saying that no, there are some few districts that have not released the funds to the head teachers to be able to do the needful. That's what I'm saying. If that is the case, we will try as much as possible to follow that up immediately.
Okay, maybe moving on, Mr. Filbert Baguma, the army of teachers who are very important in molding the generation to come. Some of them perhaps because they were not getting any salary, especially those in private schools, and they have moved on to do other things. There could be some students who return to class, but there's no teacher. How do you deal with that?
Obviously, that's what we are talking about by readiness. Good enough, most private schools have already invited the teachers, and they are taking stock of who is there and who is not there. And that will help them to have temporary measures. The only challenge will be where you advertise and you want the teachers and you find those who are coming are not yet vaccinated. Because I mean, they didn't have the jobs. So there was no motivator of them running to go for vaccination. But I want to believe this is something that can be handled within a very short time, especially when you go to the platforms, you see people calling for teachers to come to individual institutions. It will be difficult and maybe take a little bit longer when it comes to government because of the processes. Because you know they have to advertise, and it has to take some time, then they have to interview and they have to release the letters. So I think Honorable Minister and the team will also devise a mechanism, because having been at home for close to 2 years, if we again have scenarios where learners who are hesitantly coming to school, if they reach there and they don't find their teachers, they may go back and forever.
It is important talking about the school, but Honorable Minister, there are some cases where students will have no school to return to because the business owners of those schools have converted them into something else that can bring them money. In fact, there are cases of such scenarios within the Greater Kampala metropolitan area. I wonder whether government has taken trouble to understand that and how you are dealing with it.
Well, I think we should call ourselves lucky in the sense that really the schools that we have in government and those in private, when you take the stock, really the number is relatively good. And the fact that everybody has a right to take the child where you want to go, but we are in emergency mode. We are really in a war situation. When school A is closed and school B is open, being government, being private, this is the time that the most important thing is that people should take the children back to school. And I am very sure quite a number of schools will really reopen. At least we might be even over 80% or 90%. But of course a few, those that are private, the proprietors might have converted it into other businesses. They might have sold it off. Others might not be in position to start this very term as they prepare to start later on. But I believe that really the schools that we have in place will be in position to accommodate our children. Moreover, we are calling upon school administrators that yes, let's think out of the box. Instead of just thinking of this temporal structured small classroom, we can improvise. We can even take the children out. We talked about the temporal structures like the tent. We talk about something that can accommodate the children, because even under the tree, if there's no rain, where need arises. But of course, as ministry, we are trying to get in place tents
under the tree even before the pandemic, which is a shame on the government of Uganda for that to be happening. I've seen it with my own eyes, that children are being taught under a tree.
But those
and
are sometimes
I've also
schools.
seen them being taught in dilapidated, sorry buildings, and you wonder. But the Ugandan teacher is there trying to impart
But
knowledge.
those are community schools. Sometimes they come up
They
with a
deserve
school
better, Honorable
which is
Minister.
not even licensed, which they have not even informed the ministry, and somebody just wake up and start putting a structure which may not be fit for the children.
And there's a need.
But there is always
to
where we
teach.
communicate. We communicate and we get to understand what is in the community so that we plan. But if you just wake up in the morning, you start putting your own temporal structure, which is not fit to put children, supposing it collapses and kills children. So the best way
If
is
the children
communicate.
and the parents in that area had a choice,
They
would
can
never
have a
opt
choice,
to
but
to
there are
study on the
leadership in every district, and they do planning. And when this planning is done, we have the mandate also to be informed, to know what is happening, so that we plan better, other than doing things in crisis that, yes, you do not have a facility, my children are in dilapidated classrooms, so we need resources. I think we really need to do everything in line with the planning.
Mr. Baguma, I understand for better managing a crisis that we're in, if a school opens, they need to have or to observe SOPs, standard operating procedures. Things like washing hands with soap, having maybe sanitizers, having maybe temperature guns and things like that. Will the schools have these things? The minister is talking about monitoring, but simple things like temperature guns, simple things like sanitizer or washing hand facilities in a school, are they available?
Yes and no. There are those schools which reopened last year briefly, and there was an indication that every school that reopened had some level of the SOPs in place, and that's why they were allowed to reopen. I want to believe if they were not destroyed, they are still existing and they can begin from there. However, like I told you, if the funds had been released, then they would have prepared better to have a safe reopening of schools.
So this money you're talking about, have they taken care of the challenges that we face now? Because if you're sending the usual money used to send as capitation grant, which I suppose is like 10,000 shillings per child per year, and now you have more challenges, have we seen an increase in the budget to cater for what is at stake?
Well, what was sent was not the usual money which they normally send. So there was a consideration. But now the challenge is, yes, they have revised to take care of standard operating procedures. But if it is not there, then it is not going to serve the purpose. If the district, the local government, is now sending the people to assess the level of damage, when are they going to repair? When are they going to award the contract? It means the learners are going to be in school, but when the school is not ready to receive the learners. And that is the unfortunate bit.
You know, Honorable Minister, we are reopening amidst the pandemic. But of course we don't have an option, I suppose, because children need to go back to school. There's a likelihood that the virus is going to spread in the schools, and the schools do not have the capacity to handle it. Those dormitories where children are going to be will become wards with no medicine and no doctors. Are you aware of something like that could be?
Well, before responding to that question you're raising, I must say that with or without COVID, schools are supposed to meet some minimum standard for them to be able to operate. When we talk about hygiene and sanitation, even before COVID, those are bare necessity, minimum standard that schools are supposed to provide. Even before COVID, a school should have a hand washing facility. A school should have a clean environment. A school should have a better sanitation for children. After coming out of that, they have to be able to wash their hands. So now, we are actually practicing just strengthening what we were doing before. So now this time round, when we are saying on top of the hand washing facility, on top of the cleanness, on top of whatever you're doing, add the temperature gun. Is that too much? If people are saying that yes, they do not have those necessity to cater for COVID, that means before that, the schools do not have that bare necessity to ensure that our children are safe, hygienically they are upright. So that means even when they are going to eat food, there should be water for washing hands. So what I'm saying is that yes, COVID is coming. That's why we are saying, let the temperature gun be in place. And the 7-man, which the head teacher is the accounting officer, a responsible person, including the task committee in the school, the COVID task, the learners representative, which they should be in position to do this temperature taking, whether there is running nose, you have flu, you have cough, you have sore throat, or there is difficulty in breathing. There are not many parameters, just a few parameters to ask and to check the children.
We've been told, for example, that the new variant Omicron spreads like at lightning speed, because if you get somebody sick in school 2 or 3, before you know it, in 2 days the entire school probably could have contracted the disease. And if that is the case, what happens? And
that's why we need that information every day. Today we need that information. How are the children? Are there some children?
So the information about every school in rural Uganda, how is it going to be relayed to the district? Who takes the information? How is the information taken?
So what I'm saying is that every day we have the tool that the schools will have, the tool that gives information on each child in terms of the parameter I've just talked about. This information is supposed to straight away be in the digital SMS, supposed to be entered, which will go to the district, the health center 3 and then the district. In the event that there are children with signs and symptoms of COVID, immediate isolation, that means we are asking schools to designate an isolation room, at least to create a facility where some children you suspect with COVID can be kept away, and this is subjected to testing within the health center 3.
You're talking about something that is very difficult to practically put in place, because there are some schools with structures struggling even to get space. And you're saying there could be an outbreak of a pandemic in a school, and then they will find some
but it had happened. They did it before. Before that, they did. Quite a number of schools put in place the isolation facility before we went into the second lockdown. Of course, a few of them, some of them, the primary schools may not have the facility, but quite a number of them put in place. And that is what we are still emphasizing. The children can be immediately taken for timely testing and early intervention. And you know this COVID, we are now applying home care strategy. Most of these people are not admitted in the whole facility, but they have been managed under home care, and they recover, and then they come back. So the same thing is going to be for the children. We cannot just sit and wait them until they get the outbreak in the entire school. No.
I can imagine, Mr. Baguma, the entrepreneurs who started some of these schools are businessmen, and they have gone through a very rough patch because we are living in a pandemic-battered economy. And some of them were asking for some kind of a shot in the arm, some kind of a stimulus package so that they can be able to survive. What is the actual picture for the owners of schools who are struggling and who have been asking for help, and that help hasn't come?
Yeah, obviously there is struggle, but what they are doing now is that they have happily received the reopening, and they are looking here and there to make ends meet and have the schools reopen, because their hopes were lost. One time the Minister of Finance told them to sell their property and pay back the loans, which was not a good message, because when someone is on drip and you are saying find your way, it is like you are saying, okay, go and die. So the proprietors of private schools are doing what they can to have the schools reopened. However, there are those who have given up. There are those who have put the schools up for sale, possibly because of the loans, because you imagine if someone was beginning a school in 2020 and had borrowed money from the bank, had put up the structures, and was just beginning the school, and then the lockdown came in. By this time, you can imagine. There are those who rent. The landlords will definitely need money for school fees for their children. And therefore, you will not tell them that you have not been working for 2 years. So we have those who will survive, because I am told there are very few schools which have been even paying their teachers from March 2020 to date. There are those who were giving them food because schools had procured food for the learners. It was in their stores. So they kept giving food ration to the teachers for them to survive. And there are those who have changed businesses. They have made the schools, the classrooms as rentals, and they have changed the whole thing, and they have left the business. So it is not a straight line that all of them are going to reopen. We are going to see some reopening. We are going to see some not reopening. And therefore, government needs to put another plan B. Because at times you will find there is a school, a private school. Possibly it has more learners than the government school which is in the neighborhood. So if it closes, will this existing government school or institution accommodate all the learners? If they can't, then we need now plan B, either to reinforce the infrastructure in the existing school by putting temporary classrooms and by having more teachers to manage the numbers, and then we see how to move. And but it will need swiftness in actions.
And you know, school is beginning on Monday.
Yeah.
Mr. Filbert Baguma and Honorable Kaducu, we're going to take a break, and on the spot we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Honorable Dr. Joyce Moriku Kaducu, Minister of State for Primary Education, and Mr. Filbert Baguma, who's the Secretary General of UNATU, and we're discussing the reopening of schools on January 10th. Okay, apart from the infrastructure that has challenges, and the teachers maybe who have moved on, and maybe the children who have become mothers, there are those children who have completely missed out in the last 2 years, have not, been able to even read a book. There are those who have no online education. There are those who could not even watch any discussion or teaching on TV. There are those you promised radio education that really could not be followed. So we have children who have totally missed the big deal. And I wonder, how do we bring them back online so that it doesn't affect them in the years to come, and in the way also affecting the country?
You are very right that the children who are coming back to the class, they are all at different levels. We are not having the same level. Take a case of P4 class. There are children who have been engaged in business. Their now mindset is too much on business. Others have never opened the textbooks, even the home learning material. Others have opened, others have been online, others have not. So to bring all these different categories of children on the same level, it's not an easy job. That is why the teachers, first of all, we started with orienting the teachers. there was that training for the teachers. It has got a lot to do with mindset change. It has got a lot to do with psychological orientation and bringing this child back to that environment of learning.
And in that mindset change,
So,
there's a need. You have a curriculum for the
Yes.
children they're supposed to have covered. And that curriculum, they will definitely not cover it because of the 2-year gap. So what is the alternative?
that is why I say there is that teaching, there is the training for the teachers, in a manner that it should not be a marathon kind of learning. They should not rush the children, but you teach the child in a way that no child is left behind. Because if you have a child in P4, this child was previously in P3, has not completed P3, and yet is going to P4. Now here is what we call the remedial catch-up teaching. You are teaching in a manner that within these 14 weeks, this child should be able to complete the gaps that was left in P3. At the same time, at the end of the term, at the end of the year, the child should be able to complete the primary 4 and ready to go to primary 5. However, as a teacher, professional teacher, they also know the first they have to do is quick assessment. They have to assess the level at which these children are. There are those who have already gone at some level, others are still behind, others are in the middle. So as a professional teacher, they know how best they can bring these
Mr.
children at the
Filbert
same level.
Baguma, what is the practicability of what your Honourable Minister is saying?
First of all, like you have Ebre said, we have learners of 3 categories. We have learners who have continuously studied from March 2020 to date. We have a second category of learners who benefited from TV lessons, radio lessons, and some who were lucky to access the print material. Those reached somewhere in the middle and got tired because they thought they were using that in preparation to go back and got tired. However, you know, TV signals do not reach every corner. The same to radio signals. Even when you are on TV, there are those who are left behind. The learners with the disabilities.
But wait a minute. Okay, I understand. We're going to get the learners with disability. But I want you to tell me, whether it is radio or TV, what was the practicability of teaching everyone from kindergarten to high school on TV? What program do you draw? When do you teach a kindergarten and baby class? When do you teach geography for P6? When do you come to CRE for P4? When do you go for physics? I mean, how do you even spread it out? Because sometimes you can talk about these things, but is it practically possible? Or are you going to teach one lesson and before you come back, and it's going to take you another 2 weeks before you come back to one class?
Of course it
and
was
is that TV purposely only to do education programs throughout? Because some of the things you have talked about, Honourable Minister, they are not practical.
But even you can see from the newspaper, when they publish a newspaper, it is written clearly, this is P4, P5, P6, or P7. If it is O level, they specify the class. It is not just general happiness paper that is printed
I can understand
out.
it, but I'm talking about in the programming of a TV program.
And that is the same method. If the lessons are prepared, already recorded, prepared to teach, aired out for children that are in P6, and they really make announcement, they record and plan in such a way that at such a time we have the recording and the work for this specific class. And at such a time we have for this other specific category of class. And if it is something that is weekly or regular, over time, children got to know. If it is a Monday at this time, I know the lesson is for me. I'm in P5. This is the time.
You know, the subjects are more than 20.
Absolutely.
And the classes are more than, I don't know how many.
But I think
so I'm looking at how you divide the subjects, which are many, and then you divide the different classes, and then you allocate the time. By the time you go back to the subject you started with, is it after 3 months or what?
First of all, you need to realize that when COVID-19 broke out, it caught us off guard as a country, and it brought the teaching learning process to a halt, including universities, because we didn't have an infrastructure in place to have the virtual learning. So when we talk of TV lessons, radio lessons, these were initiatives in the direction of continuing the teaching learning process. Not everybody benefited from this. P1, P2, P3, how? Those lessons, they did not benefit. But these other classes, there was a program that was given out. And each class had its own day and subject. Now, we cannot tell, nobody can tell you how many learners would be listening to the radio at a certain point in time, or how many learners would be watching the television at a certain point in time. That is an assumption that the television sets are in every home and the radios are in every home. So this was an initiative to continue the teaching learning process. Now, we have the other third category of those who never and have not and may not even know where the books are. From March 2020 up to date, for them when the schools closed, they also closed the chapter and went. Now that's why we are going to have the teacher at the center of this reopening and going forward. But remember, this teacher is also traumatized, is also stressed, and is going to meet the learners who are stressed, who are traumatized. They are coming from the parents who are also traumatized and stressed. And therefore, it is going to be a gradual and continuous process of training and retraining and supporting these teachers psychologically so that they are able to give us what we expect from them, because they have a challenge. The learners have a challenge. The parents, from where they are coming from, some of them lost their jobs. Others have been getting half pay. Others were told, you go back home, we monitor the situation, we shall call you. Now, we are saying bring school fees. So these are the parents we are dealing with. Some of the teachers suffered from COVID, but thank God they survived. Others, it is their dear ones or their close relatives who were sick and they were taking care of them. Thank God some of them survived. Now, there are those who were affected directly or indirectly. Now, this is the situation we are in. So we cannot say that the effects of close to 2 years will be solved by a training of 3 days. It must be continuous. The learners they are going to handle are not the learners they used to handle. You are handling a learner who has been getting money and putting on the pocket. Even coming to school, the learner will be having some money in the pocket. But you are convincing this learner that, look, we need to study. So it is a whole process that needs that gradual but slow. If we take them at a certain speed, we shall make the bad situation worse. And the parents also will need training. They will need to be supported. They will need to be, at some point in time, to be invited and taken through, because they are equally affected, like the learners, like the teachers.
So I can actually see, Honorable Minister, the increase of the inequality in Uganda, because there are those students who have been studying online, first world schools in Kampala or even international schools, but schools following the same curriculum like any other. They have not stopped. They have used these tools available to them, and tomorrow, at the end of the year, you're going to assess them just like the other people who never had anything to follow.
I think, yes, the inequality is there in terms of the learners who are in rural place, who may not be having the internet, the television. Then there are those learners who are in urban, who have got access to all these digital gadgets. And that is true that there is that inequality. The distribution is not equal. But of course, that is why the ministry got the idea of giving the home study material, which every learner can access, even those in rural school. But much as they had a lot of challenges, as my colleague said, these are really initiative, innovation, after immediately when COVID came in, put in place to ensure that as we close the door in schools for learning, the physical learning, we continue with the learning in different format.
You know,
so now the point
there was
is
a promise by the chief executive of this country, the president, that they are going to procure radios so that learners, they can be distributed to some homes. I think even money was appropriated.
I think that's not a new story. You recall, true, the executive made that, came with that brilliant idea, which idea the cabinet overwhelmingly supported it. But when it came to parliament to pass the budget, to approve, I think it met some resistance. We cannot go into those details. So the money could not be approved, and that's where we stopped. So that is the part where why the gadgets were not procured now. Much as there were those inequalities, recall the recently released...
But then that shows you that the medium through which the children could have studied, those who do not have what it takes in their homes, totally missed out. But
the recently PLE results that has been released, the US results, that was for 2020, and when the children sat for those results, they performed really. Nobody expected that they will have scored such marks. They will have performed in that manner. But that shows to you that resilience that they developed, commitment then they put in books, and the way everybody was busy to work for these children, and that is the outcome really.
Okay.
And I think we need to be very optimistic, and we need all to be supportive, to support these children as they come back to school. We know that they come from different background, they may come with different gifts, others are now well skilled because they have been doing a lot of skilling work, but let's all support these children collectively to ensure that they are nurtured in those skills they have been developing, they are given the right knowledge. As you said, the teachers will take some time to bring them together, but if we all support them, then it will yield a better fruit. But also the parents, in our circular, the one we release, we have made it clearly, all schools as they open, they should work hand in hand with the Board of Governors, with the school management, the PTAs, and the foundation body. They should not work in isolation if they are meeting.
I want to know the concern of that child who has become a mother during this pandemic and probably has a baby at home, and she still has a dream of continuing with education. How is the school going to receive this child mother, and what facilities are there for that child to go to class, but also maybe tend to her baby? Because I suppose you were encouraging them to return to school.
Yes, our policy is clear that the girl child, the teenage mothers, those who have delivered, because they are not married, they are not really ready for marriage, they have delivered where our hands are open. The door is open for them to come back to school. And what is the implication? The implication is that there are different levels. These girls gotten married. If they are at institutional level, the way how they are handled is different from the way they are in a basic education. A case in point is those in tertiary. Those ones can avail facilities for their babies. They can study with their babies, as opposed to the ones in primary and secondary. Those ones in primary, honestly, once they have delivered, we request the parents, after exclusive breastfeeding, that means 6-month breastfeeding, they leave the babies, the children, with their mother, and they come back to achieve their dream. We're not encouraging so much for the schools to have what, like in workplace. Workplace, we encourage the breastfeeding rooms for the mothers. As they work, they go back and breastfeed. We are not encouraging so much that in school, because this girl cannot study, at the same time run out and breastfeed, think about stigma, think about discrimination and all that. So what we are saying all in all is that this girl has got a dream, has got a bright future, but the most important is a support from the parent. The parent should support them by looking after the baby and allow this girl, this boy, to come back to school. There are many stakeholders who are really campaigning for this program to ensure that all of us help the parents to take care of this girl. If any partner, any NGO will wish to support these girls, the best they can offer is to help the girls to support the babies when the babies are with the parents at home.
Okay.
It will not be good to create another facility within school premises such that we bring another nursery or another kind of breastfeeding place. That is really not logical.
You're assuming that some of these children, actually, the child mothers also have mothers at home to stay with what? Sometimes the situation can be really very dire in their homes where they're coming from. But Mr. Filbert Baguma, as a teacher, how would you handle such cases? Because I'm sure there are cases of these girls who are mothers now, maybe majority would feel, would not have the stamina to go back to school, but maybe there will be those who will.
Yeah, first of all, COVID-19 has created a new world order. They have called it the new normal, but I think it is the new abnormal. It can't be the new normal. This is where so many numbers of girl children have been impregnated, and now here we are saying they need to have a second chance because the numbers are overwhelming. Wakiso is over 10,000.
10,000?
Yes,
Wakiso.
when you look at the records that are coming out, Kasese around 8,000, Mukono 7,000, and the numbers vary from district to district. Now, if you look at that number, plus the number of their children, you will see a whole generation getting a challenge. And therefore, as teachers, we have to get ready and prepared to receive these children. Most of them did not deliberately go to look for these pregnancies. You know, because of lockdown and the restrictions on movement, everybody was at home. And like the saying goes that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. Some of these girls were impregnated as incest. The uncles, the cousins are the ones who impregnated them. Others were impregnated when they had gone to fetch water, when they had gone to the shops. Now, this girl is innocent. You have been defiled, you have been impregnated.
So you're telling us actually that COVID is showing us how the class or the school is a safe haven for the Ugandan girl child.
It has been proven beyond doubt that the best place for a school-going child learner is the school with the teachers and not the home with the parents and guardians. There used to be a lot of noise that the teachers are the ones who impregnate school children. Now, are they the teachers who found them in their homes? So, COVID-19 has brought it clearly that the learners are safer in school and not at home.
Jimmy, if you could pause there, whereas it is good for our children to be safe at school, it's a shame, Honorable Minister, that it is not the same, they are not safe in our homes. And recently I saw there's a proposition from the Minister of Gender to give the Ugandan parents parenting guidelines. And that's another shame, that the government of Uganda wants to teach parents to look after their children. Is that how low we have become?
But I think this is a collective responsibility. It's a responsibility that starts from really the cultural background. You know, we are rich as people of Uganda, as Africans. We've got rich culture. We are all believers. We've got a very strong faith that molds and nurtures us as we grow up. And I think over time, this moral, this integrity is really decaying. And at the end of it, everybody look at the government, when actually, in the actual sense, we as people of Uganda, from the time you are born, from the time you are brought up in that family, there are a lot of family etiquette. There are a lot of cultural integrity, the morals that you grow as you are in that family. And long ago, recall now these days, the ICT has taken over everything. At the time we are growing, you sit in the evening with the elders, the entire family. That is the time when they really tell a lot of disciplinary stories and how you behave, how you have to greet people. You know, you grow up knowing that you have that background. But today, you get the children, they are dancing, they are for music, they are for betting, they are for video. Which time do they have to get those
I think you're also aware that
information?
You who are in two positions of leadership are supposed to be the moral compass of the nation. So if you don't have it, there's a leadership responsibility there that the children of Uganda will not have it.
That is why we have role models. We have people of integrity still. Ugandans, there are quite many with integrity, with quite moral. They are mentors, they are leaders. And that is why we are saying, let it be a collective responsibility. We come together as they bring the cultural leader, bring the religious leaders, bring everybody on the same table. Let's do our part and mold and nurture these children so that they grow up as responsible citizens for this country. The school has got its role to play. But when the child goes back home, we also need that home-groomed environment to bring up this single child who will be tomorrow the Minister of State for Primary Health Care, who will be tomorrow Mr. Patrick Kamara, and sit and really moderate this kind of talks. So I think that is where we are speaking. And much as the schools are open, which is a safe haven for our children, we are also appealing. They will not be for perpetually in schools. Time will come, they go back for holiday. This home learning initiative we have started, we do not want to kill it. We want it to continue. When the children stop studying and the schools have closed for holiday, as they get back home, that environment should be conducive and they continue. They rest, they work, and they have that culture of reading.
Okay.
And that is what we are calling for.
Some teachers in private schools have complained of working without contracts, have sometimes been just summarily dismissed from school, and sometimes their pay has delayed or paid really peanuts. And these are their concerns. I wonder whether UNATU the organization for which you are Secretary General, looks into some of these issues and probably you can address them in some way?
Obviously, that has been a disease, and that is just weak enforcement of the law, because we have the Employment Act. But we have been having a gap in deployment of labor officers at the local government level. And therefore, these teachers and other workers would not have where to run to in the case of a challenge. And sometimes the employers have got the financial muscle. Even when you go to the labor officer, they rush there and give them a tip, and then they confuse you and confuse you until you get tired. But we have got a chore. In 2019, Cabinet approved the National Teachers Policy on 1st April 2019. We are going to have the teaching profession regulated. And therefore, those who have been having teachers without contracts, dreaming about firing a teacher, and in the morning the teacher has no job, not paying them for 2 months, and then in the 3rd month you fire them and bring another one who is also going to work for nothing for 2 months, they should count their days on their fingers, because we have got a chore now.
Okay.
But also the enforcement of the laws which we have and the policies which we have in this country should be improved. Because teaching in a private school does not make you a private Ugandan. The children you are teaching are Ugandan children, they are not private.
You know, on matters of pay and the fees that we pay, sometimes, Honorable Minister, I would want to know, why is it that we have schools which are considered government schools or government-aided schools, and in some cases, the school fees we pay is even much more than a purely private? Does it make sense? I don't want to mention names of different, there are very many, government-aided or government schools. And, you pay school fees that is even more than a purely private. How do we reach that? How did we come to that?
Yes, we have actually the UPE, we have the USE schools, and then those are non-USE, meaning that they are not, they might be government schools, but not getting support from government, rather the USE. And of course, there are those that are government aided. Now the point comes.
These traditional schools, as you know them, secondary schools.
Non-USE.
Non-USA.
Yes.
What kind of support do they get from government? Are their teachers paid by government?
Yes, of course.
So
Among the schools,
why
there
is
are
it a government aided or a government school asking me to pay more than even a purely private?
Actually, if you listen carefully, this evening, the First Lady and the Minister of Education and Sports gave a statement about the school's fees issues that is going around. It has become a topical issue in the country. And at the beginning of her statement, she made it clear in 2017, she set a committee that was chaired by Professor Kayanja to do research and to find out really what can we do as far as school fees matters are concerned in USE schools, in non-USE schools, and all those issues concerning school fees. People are charging, irregularly charging school fees. So that matter, I think we have the report, and immediately after that, COVID came in. But what I can say is that from the statement she released this evening, it is apparently very clear that schools that plan to raise school fees irregularly from the time when we close in 2020, they are all requested to please to come back to where they were those that have issued and added high school fees, they are to come back to what it was before we close in 2020. She made it clear that schools that plan to do heavy infrastructural development, they should for this time stop. They should not go on with that, because that is what, again, they put the burden back on the parents. And then, of course, there are schools that have started already charging parents to pay money for COVID tests as the children get back to school, the learners. Even that one, the National Task Force has said, no, that is not a mandatory for schools to do. So all in all, the issue of school fees has been thoroughly clarified by the First Lady and the Minister of Education and Sports. And I want to make a special appeal now for private schools, and most especially government non-USE schools. For those that have hiked the school fees, please withdraw those circulars you have sent to parents. Put another circular indicating the right amount of school fees. Other than that, we are coming for you.
Honorable Kaducu and Mr. Baguma, we're going to take a break, and on the spot we'll be right back. When we come back, I'll open the line so that you two can be a part of this discussion. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. Pick your phone and call us and tell us what you think. But we also want to look into the issue of curriculum, because there was a proposition to change the curriculum. Is that still pertaining? We'll be right back. Welcome back on the spot. My name is Patrick Amar, and my guests this evening are Honorable Joyce Moriku Kaducu, Minister of State for Primary Education, and Mr. Filbert Baguma, who is the Secretary General of UNATU, and we're discussing the reopening of schools, which is happening on the 10th of January, which is Monday next week. And this is the moment when you get to have your say. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. Pick your phone and call us and tell us what you think. Please make it precise and concise so that you can have many other people contribute in this discussion. As they wait for your comments and your questions, I also need to ask the Minister, because there was a proposition of a new curriculum. And this curriculum is so engaging, and I think it was welcomed. So in this era of reopening, are we likely to see that happen? And has there been the training of teachers to orient them in the new curriculum?
The curriculum is basically a abridged version of the previous curriculum. It is basically made in such a way to cater for the lost time, the time that the learners have lost when they were not at school. Because much as we are starting to realize from January up to December, the calendar has been already out, put in such a way that, like first term, there are 14 weeks, and in these weeks, a learner who was previously in one class now in the next class has got a gap. And that curriculum, which runs for 1 year, should be in position to fill the gap.
Honourable Minister, the curriculum I'm talking about is the idea of total overhaul of what has been the curriculum you're following into something better that can produce a better Ugandan. With some practical skills and more of hands-on. I think that's what...
I think that was the curriculum that came just before COVID.
Yes.
And that is really the competence-based, which
yes.
look at the getting...
Because it was addressing a certain need or a certain gap.
That one is what you're talking about.
Yes.
But what I'm meaning is that at this time that there is this interruption, there was disruption of the learning process. How do we catch up? And you cannot go back to the original curriculum that has been there. You need to make it in such a way the curriculum should cover for what is now and what has been lost, so that you bring the child at the same level. But we have not given up with that curriculum, which is competence-based, which is looking at the skills that this child will come up to be a competent person at the end of the training, that level. So that one is there. But the specific one is the bridge version, which I'm talking about.
So, Mr. Baguma, if the new curriculum is rolled out, how would the teachers handle it when they have not been prepared to teach that new curriculum?
Yeah, obviously there has always been a gap. When reforms come in, there is an assumption that the teachers are always ready to teach. True, the content may be the same, but the teachers need some level of preparation so that they are able to facilitate the teaching learning process. And I want to believe that this abridged curriculum will be readily available come next week so that the teachers can interact with it and get ready to teach using it. There was also a new curriculum for our secondary, which had just begun.
Yes. In fact, that's the one I'm more interested in.
And a few teachers had just been trained, average around 4 teachers per school. But now we are going to have 2 cohorts to use that curriculum. We have the senior one of 2020, which is now going to senior 2. And then those who are in P7 and are going to senior 1. At the time of the lockdown, the textbooks under the new curriculum were not readily available in schools. In fact, in most cases, they were using prototypes, which were also being sent online. And some of the rural schools could not even download some of this information. But shortly, they had not been there for more than a month, and the lockdown came in. And now we are looking at senior 2. They are also supposed to be having their textbook material so that they have this senior 1 and then senior 2. So there is a need for preparation to make sure that the teachers who are going to handle senior 2 are prepared and given what to use. In this era, we need to see teachers well facilitated, supported, and motivated, because the task ahead of them is really demanding. And therefore, if we have the teachers whose hands are tied, we may not realize what we are looking at in the current circumstances.
Honorable Kaducu, as Minister of State for Primary Education, when you look at the mode of assessment for the competence of the children in school, is it fair for somebody to be in school for 7 years or for 4 years and you just pick only these 3 hours, and those are the hours you're going to base on of the exam you have given to really tell the competence of this child? Or maybe moving forward you're going to see the assessment changes, which maybe becomes continuous. Over the years you see how the child has been, as opposed to giving them an exam of 3 hours and that determines how good you have been.
I think there are 2 types of assessment we're speaking about. We have the summative assessment, but we also have the continuous assessment. Which continuous assessment is continuous? Of course, whatever you do within that period of time is assessed at the end of it, then the end of the final assessment. So I do not think that the assessment we give is just for the few hours and can give you a fair representation of what that child is, but it is something that it is collectively all through that should give a fair, better picture and assess the child in a better way. Otherwise, I don't think it can just be for a few hours.
But I mean, that's what happens now, as in that's what is pertaining. You sit for PLA or for O-level, and that will determine whether if you wake up on one day and you have a headache or something has happened and you don't do well, probably you have missed it.
But by the time
if you are able to read and maybe somebody to give you a hint that this is what is going to come and you pass it, then you will be presented as the best. And yet you could have changed as a government, working with schools, and from P1 you're able to say maybe the continuous assessment takes about 40%, and maybe the end of exam at O level in senior 4 takes 60%. You combine them.
But I think, let me say for primary, for example, by the time you reach primary 7, you've passed very many stages. Yeah. And at each stage, you have an assessment, you are promoted. And the final one is the one in primary 7, which exams are collective from what you pass all through. And that is the final exam. But when you look at the back, for example, the universities, it has been that way before that, when it was termly system. You do the exams at the end of it, at the end of that year, you have everything. But then, if you see now how it has evolved, and there was a reform that you have the semester system. Whatever you do in that semester, of course, the progressive assessment count for some percentage. At the end of it all, the examination takes some percentage, and it is for that semester. As you move to the next semester, you cover what is within that semester. So I think it's really a matter of time. Gradually, you can see some reforms, you can see some transformation that is more favoring the academic sector for the students.
Mr. Filbert Baguma, your take on the mode of assessment?
Obviously, our mode of assessment is not the best. One, you study so many subjects, let's say at primary level, and at the end of the day you are assessed in only 4. I may be good in music, but at primary living, there is no exam in music. I may be good at physical education, and so on. So that's one area. Two, it is too much for the learner. You see, you start from primary 1 up to primary 7. At the end of the day, they are going to ask you questions from even the classes which you had completed. And therefore, the learner has a burden to make sure that if you are preparing for primary living examinations, you must read all the content for the 7 years. It is a burden to the learner. It would have been easier that when you finish a class, you have completed it and the assessment is recorded. So that if you fail at, let's say you get out of school at primary 5, you should be able to have an assessment. But in the current situation, if you don't do primary living examination, you are as good as someone who never went to school in terms of certification, in terms of documentation.
Let me get some comments here that have come from people who are watching. Somebody says, but surely, how can you people be seated at 11 p.m., i.e. fathers and a mother in a studio, away from your children, and get surprised when things aren't okay at home? Many parents at this time are busy at work, like you, in hospitals, bars, shopping centers, etc. And children are watching movies with maids, relatives. As we get surprised when they are impregnated, the question would rather be, what can we do given this problem that can hit any family in Uganda? Is there a parent who works as a business person, security service, expatriates, health service, that can say, I've been able to be present and have parented my children very well and they are immune to sexual abuse? In my opinion, the answer is no. And we need to rethink of a serious strategy. And if I could also pick just another. Honorable Moriku, we are waiting for a policy shift for government to reclaim the education sector from the private sector back to government. The current reality alienates the poor from offering their children quality education, which they can't afford. Payment of Uganda shillings 2.5 million per child only encourages corruption among public servants to survive. What do you make of this?
Well, it's which one? The first one or second?
Both of them.
Okay. To start with the second one, yes, it is true. Is waiting for government to reclaim the education system from the private sector. Well, it is true, education system has got very many private, the owners of private schools, there are quite many, and the charges are quite huge, but not only the primary private schools, also the government non-USE schools are charging quite huge some amount of money. And that is a very good observation that we really need to do something. We need to do something about it, and we need to do things differently. I just appreciate his concern. I hope that that will be a collective responsibility. We work together to improve the status of our schools, most especially the rural schools. The performance, the standards, if we can make it better, then that is when we can say yes, children will get more in the public schools compared to the private schools. Because you realize that parents can leave a government school here, but is able to pay that huge sum of money in the private school. Why? Because already the mindset is fixed that the child will not perform well in public. So we need to do something about it.
In our homes, the challenge in our homes? In
our homes, that is the same thing we've been talking about, that we have a problem. We have now known the problem. The root cause of the problem, it starts from the parents. The parents need to give time for their children. They need to train. They need to be the informal teachers. Your first teacher should be your parent. Your first lover should be your parent. Your first girlfriend, boyfriend should be your parent. So that the parent has time, and you can only do that when you give time for the child.
All right.
Time to sit with the child and to talk with the children.
Otherwise, somebody else will do it for you.
Otherwise, somebody will come and take over that place. If I'm not my daughter's, she's not your friend, like you don't say even the word "I love you" to your child, your son, your daughter. Somebody will come and fill in that gap, the gap you leave between you and your child. And he's right. The parents have to do.
Our time is out. I just want to thank you for your time, but maybe just to hear very briefly what's going to be your concluding remark, Mr. Filbert Baguma.
Yeah, I want to call upon all responsible persons in the preparation of safe reopening of schools to do their part between now and Sunday, because we don't have more time to waste. I want to encourage the teachers, learners of 18 years and above to go and get vaccinated, because at least the survey indicates most local governments have got the vaccines. But I also want to call upon the ministry, Honorable, to soften on the stance. Let's have these learners and teachers and the non-teaching staff come. We take stock of who is vaccinated and who is not vaccinated within the school. Within the first week, we shall have everybody vaccinated, because the numbers will be known and there will be no excuse.
All right.
I want to encourage all stakeholders. Let us identify these learners who have gotten out of school because of pregnancies, because of delivery of children, those who are in business, those who are in child labor, so that we bring them back and give them a second chance, because they have dreams to fulfill in the education system of this country.
Honorable, what's going to be your concluding remark?
Yeah, my concluding remark is just I want to call upon all school proprietors and school head teachers, administrators. We have given circular on how to operate the schools. We are expecting the schools to put in place all measures to prevent the outbreak of COVID, as I've explained. Besides that, we are restricting visitors in the schools. We are restricting days of visitation. Parents, you should know that for those on boarding, when they come to school, We are not allowing those visitations. That means the child should come well prepared. Counsel the child such that we don't get frequent visitation, even other visitation. And we are saying that there should be supervision when the children are in school, supervision during meal, during break. And of course, the co-curriculum activities and sports are encouraged, but under maximum supervision. And of course, the last thing I want to leave with our viewers is about the school fees. I once again want to make a special appeal to you, the big schools who have hiked the school fees. The message is clear and loud that let's go back to the previous school fees that you were charging when the lockdown came in place, that is in March 2020. If you do not heed to the call that was made this evening, we are just going to give a week. After that, we take stock of all the schools and the school fees that you have increased, and after that, really we will take very serious actions against those schools. Otherwise, our stand still stands that school fees should not be increased. And taking stock of teachers, it is this week. This is the week that they are taking stock of teachers, who is vaccinated, who is not, to give time for others to be vaccinated. This is the week for national cleaning up of the school. And I want to thank all those who have done. For those who have not done, please, you still have some few days to do it. I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Honorable Dr. Joyce Moriku Kaducu. Thank you so much, Mr. Filbert Baguma. And also thank you so much, you who has been watching this program. We want to thank you for a great company. We have gone through a very tough time as a country. Our economy has been battered by the pandemic. The education has been disrupted. But Uganda, we're a great country and we're resilient people. We have pulled through before. We can pull through again. Good night and God bless Uganda.